Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start by thanking ETNO for the very kind invitation, for being here today, and to share with you some of the views that I have, mainly as chair of ANACOM, the regulator, the Portuguese regulator. I will be the incoming chair of BEREC next year, but for now, I'm talking essentially as the Portuguese regulator. I'd like to tell you that, first of all, I'm coming from a country where I'm very proud of our sector. And I think that our role as regulators is also just to make to talk about our sector, to defend our sector, not only talk about consumers, but also talk about all the players in the market. I'd like to start by, telling, as a kickoff, telling you some figures, but I'm sure that all of you already know some of these figures, so I will go very quick through these slides. So when we look at next year's, we just see a huge growth of demand for high-speed broadband, for all the services of electronic communications. We can see that right now we have about 300 million mobile PCs, tablets, mobile router subscriptions, and these 300 million will turn in 5 years in 650 million. We have right now about 1.9 billion smartphone subscriptions, but by 2019, these figures will become 5.6 billion. So we are talking about a huge growth of demand for high-speed mobile services. And also, when we look around, when we see that we have right now 2.5 billion people online, and this amounts to 40% of the entire population. Or if we say that 1.9 billion people are now active on social networks, we have a picture of what we are talking about. We are talking about the connected world, and we are talking about people that look for mobility, that want to be connected in any place at any hour. Well, the sectors that where we observe this demand for mobile services has been the larger growth has been mainly in health sector, agriculture, and not surprisingly also in education and entrepreneurship. But in order to give a response to this huge demand, technology has been developing in order to supply higher and higher speeds. And from ADSL to VDSL, vectoring, GPON, and right now GFast, we are, the sector has been able to offering each time higher speeds. The same for the LTE, but let me just give you a figure where by 2019, we expect to have 2.6 billion LTE subscriptions. But mainly, we are also talking about a sector where some major trends are part of our concerns. And we are talking about a market that has reached a certain maturity where we observe a slowdown in growth. Voice and data price have been declining. ARPUs are lower. And as we were talking before, probably we don't expect them to get up again. Competition has been intensifying. We have new players in the market. We have OTTs, MVNOs, resellers, all of them also sharing this sector and competing for some room in the market. We have growing user demand, but also we have more sophisticated consumers. So now we have consumers that are more informed, they know what they are looking for, and the demand is increasing, and this puts also more pressure on spectrum demand. And we are talking about increasing demand on one side, but a fixed supply on the other side. So we look at the figures, and we also see that we have over 3 times as many broadband connections as fixed broadband subscriptions. And this means, again, more pressure for spectrum. And mainly, we are in a transition from a high-growth market to a mass market. And this brings us a challenging environment and potentially some disruptive trends. And I would like to mention some of them very briefly. So we have voice services, messaging, and broadcast via OTT. And some of them look at OTTs as a threat, some of them look at OTTs as an opportunity. And, well, they are indeed a threat to the traditional business models, but without many of the services that are provided, many of the contents that are provided from OTTs are the driver for demand, for high-speed demand, and we cannot forget this. So we have also the opportunity for partnerships between traditional operators, OTTs, service providers and content providers, also equipment manufacturers and content producers. So we are facing a different world, and important is to get some balance and not leave the balance to go just on one side. Well, I don't need to talk about this type of partnerships that you have seen between Comcast and Netflix or Verizon and Netflix, but these are some of the examples that we have been observing in this area. Okay, but other areas, convergence is the word that we have been using so often in the last few years. We are talking about convergence between fixed and mobile. We are talking about convergence of network services, devices, but also we are talking about a new ways of defining the market. And we are talking mainly about having a massification of bundles. And this has a different impact on the market. Especially from the regulator point of view, we must treat bundles in a different way when we must look at the market definition, at the assessment of market power, or even about regulatory approaches to remedies. And this is a new segment of the market that we must pay attention. But other trends that might be disruptive, or no, we don't know yet. Big data and the analytics. Are we talking about big disruption? Well, there is a lot of opportunities about big data. But if we can think about all the advantages, we can also think about the dangers, mainly in terms of data privacy. This will allow for service customization, or also, on the other side, for discrimination in prices, services, and opportunities. And the access of Internet of Things applications to these big data and data sharing will give us the rise to the Internet of everything. And we are facing a new world of opportunities. And we are facing a world where everything is connected, and the opportunities are still unforeseen, many of them. We still need to discover them. However, what is important is that the introduction of Internet Protocol version 6, so the IPv6, will remove the technical limits on the number of devices connected to the Internet. And this allows us for trillions of devices to be connected. And this is really a new world. And in terms of the cloud, everything accessible, everywhere, at any time. We'll have streaming rather than owning, and we'll have emerging changes of patterns of work organization, cost of information, and location of industries. So there is opportunity for our lives to change. There are also new opportunities for service providers. But again, there is a dark side. And the dark side is that we also have some concerns with security and data privacy that we must treat in the future. We are looking at a smarter world. We are looking at a world where, and this is one of the main concerns in Europe, where we have aging of the European population. And I might remind you that the forecasts for 2050 indicate that by that time, 1/3 of the European population will be more than 65 years old. If you take this problem and on the other side, concerns for cost effectiveness, this means that we have an increased service and opportunities regarding e-health, smart homes, and remote caring, for example, for elderly people living alone, or everything that comes with machine-to-machine and smart grids. But also, on the other side, you can think about e-education. And I don't need to remind you what this connected and smarted world had brought in terms of e-education. Right now, you can connect to Coursera and have access online to courses from the 85 top universities in the United States. And you can attend the course of the most famous professors in the US. And this is a revolution, even for business schools. Business schools, I used to be dean of a business school, and let me tell you, they are also facing this new world, and they don't know how to deal with it in the future, because students can stay home and attend the courses of the best professors in the world. So why should they go to the university? Right, so we have also another important issue that is related to the current situation in Europe right now. And we also must take into account issues concerning digital inclusion and the potential new concept of poor. Now we can talk about the wealthy poor, the working poor, and the new poor. We are talking about people that in many cases lost their jobs, people that have a job but don't have enough revenue to afford a certain standard of life. We are talking about people that are somehow, they have assets, but they cannot transform these assets into cash. So we are talking about people that are more sensitive to retail price variations, people that have more difficulties to adhere to innovative services because sometimes they are associated to some market premium. So in terms of what we must answer the question, how can infrastructure deployment be properly incentivized? Let me tell you that, first of all, we must take into account that it's important to have fair and reasonable terms and conditions for access to physical infrastructure, including price, because it's very important to have infrastructure sharing and coordination of civil works. I must remind you, 80% of the costs of deploying fiber or deploying NGAs is connected to civil works. And sharing or having access to ducts and poles is crucial. I can tell you that part of the success of deploying fiber in Portugal, where the coverage of NGN is very high, is related to the fact that we have 24,000 kilometers of ducts from the incumbent Portugal Telecom. And we were the first country in Europe with a reference offer in terms of access to ducts. And this means that passing one house, the cost of passing one house with fiber is less than 200 euros in Portugal, and the average in Europe is it's between 700 and 800. In some countries in the north of Europe, it can reach 3,000 euros. So this makes a big difference when you must pick one technology. We need better regulation, and I think that all of you agree with me. We need to be very careful because regulation can inhibit or stimulate technological change. Everything depends on the design and instrumental choice of regulation policy. So in order to get a better regulation, we must, first of all, be concerned about measures that are proportional and they are specific to the nature of the problems. They are predictable as much as possible. They favor technology innovation and diffusion, and they preserve new entrants' ability to use networks in new and unforeseen ways. Also, sharing best practices and regulatory innovation, as we do in BEREC, is also very important. Well, I don't know to go through this, but mainly just to tell you that all the main recommendations and directives have been designed in such a way that we are getting lighter regulation. The number of regulated relevant markets has been decreasing. I might remember you, it was 18 2003, 7 2007, and now it's reducing to 4. So somehow we are trying as regulators to get a lighter intervention in the markets. We also believe that this is the right way. Oh, sorry. How can we ensure innovation on services to the consumer? Right, defining the problem properly, acting only if justified, being proportional in the regulatory action, ensuring a transparent allocation of benefits to all the stakeholders, and of course regulating in a clear, transparent, consistent and understandable way for all the end users, and especially allowing all stakeholders to express their views and their different options. I truly believe that regulators must be pay a lot of attention to stakeholders and to listen to what the stakeholders want to say. But when you look at the regulators' panorama, you understand that we have regulators with very different competitions around the world. This is a graph coming from the IT telecommunications regulatory database, and you can see that you have the different areas that regulators have an intervention, like licensing, price regulation, spectrum monitoring, universal access and service, broadcast content, internet content, and IT. And you can see that the light blue bars represent the percentage of regulators that have an intervention, play a role in these areas. And you can see that between 50 and 65% of regulators in the world act in these areas that are the traditional areas for regulators. However, for sector regulators. However, when you look at broadcasting content, internet content, and information technology, you can observe that there are different, the panorama is very diverse, which means that in these areas that somehow are now connected to our sector, the intervention of regulators is much lower. So we need to think about regulatory balancing. We need to rethink about ICT regulation and to think about, oops, I have been going back instead of forward. This is a problem for regulators. So, rethinking, we must think about this balancing, regulatory balancing. And we must rethink about ICT regulation because we have this broadband ecosystem that continues to expand, and we must adapt. We must have a flexible approach of regulation at different levels. Networks, services, applications, and we believe that our role should be regulators as facilitators. And why not talk about a 4G generation, regulation? And probably this is what we really need, to think about a new regulation approach. And for this, we must adopt a light touch regulatory approach. This is pretty much based on what the State of Broadband report that just came out is stating, and I pretty much agree with this. We must adopt a light touch regulatory approach and ensure principles of fair, equal, non-discriminatory treatment for all market players. And this means a level playing field among regulated and non-regulated players. So we go back to the question of all these players that somehow are in the sector, but they are not under the same rules of the telecom operators. Streamline procedures to facilitate market entry and stimulate competition. Conduct market analysis to assess the market situation in a new, different, and converged environment. And especially, it's very important to empower consumers to make informed decisions. And for this, it's important to give them the tools that will allow for check download speeds, quality of service, and also to check the prices of data plans and things like this. In terms of also the 4G generation, we must think about monitor the use of traffic management techniques, soft measures to encourage network and facility sharing. For this, it's very important, for example, to have what we can call infrastructure mapping to enable civil works coordination. Right now in ANACOM, we are working on the implementation of a centralized information system that will allow all operators to get information about the ducts and pools that are available and can accommodate electronic communication networks. This is very important to help the deployment of NGNs. We must work with all stakeholders, and we must facilitate broadband development and social inclusion as well. But it's not just a question of investment, because I think that we have been talking about the profitability of the sector, the need of investment, but we also need to think about the other side. And the other side of the market is demand. And we need to incentivize demand. Otherwise, we can boost investment, we can deploy networks, but then we don't have take-up. This is the problem that we are facing in Portugal. We have one of the highest penetrations or coverage of NGN in Europe, but when you look at the take-up, it's much lower than the European average. And there are a lot of factors that can explain this. First of all, of course, the economic situation, but also we have other issues that we should address, and some of them are structural, and some of them can be solved in the short term. So we must address the obstacle of broadband adoption, high costs, and this can be done with some support in terms of subsidies or tax incentives for people, low-income households, to buy computers or to have access to broadband subscription. We also must, this is very important, and because I'm here, and I'm probably the only regulator that is here, I feel very lonely, but this is one of the sectors where there are more complaints, even more than bank sector. And this is a problem. Many times is related to the fierce competition that we face in the market, but it's also a problem that in many situations, in terms of a contractual relationship, there is a lack of transparency. This is what I feel in Portugal. and this is what I've been fighting for. So we must implement transparency obligations. We must inform end users about the most pertinent contractual clauses, because contracts, sometimes they are so complex that the regular customer doesn't understand all these bunch of pages with very little letters. And we also must ensure that consumers are confident about the contractual relationship, namely in terms of correct billing and also improvement in the effectiveness of complaint handling procedures. Well, there are many cases, but probably I think that one of the obstacles that we face in some of the European countries is a low digital literacy rate. And I think that we should also all work all together to decrease this problem. Well, we are talking about the next wave, probably a big wave. I'm coming from a surfer's paradise. Portugal is right now a surfer's paradise because we have the biggest wave in the world. Have you heard about Nazaré? We have this incredible 30 meters wave. So we are for sure used to ride one wave after the other. And we will for sure be ready to ride the wave of innovation, investment, and better regulation. Don't forget that regulators right now are bound by the legislative framework, and the 4G regulation, the next generation regulation, will depend very much on the outcome of the Connected Continent regulation and also of the next framework review. In the next 12 months, we will have the responsibility of ensuring that BEREC delivers the appropriate regulatory tools so to allow competitive markets to offer users the best choices and prices. To that end, the dialogue with stakeholders is of paramount importance for us. On the 16th of October, BEREC will organize the next stakeholders forum that will take place here in Brussels, where all interested parties will have the chance of discussing the new BEREC strategy and its work program for 2015. These two documents are currently under public consultation, and of course we are eager to receive all your inputs. Thank you so much for your attention.